Our guest today is Radha Chakravarty, who's a writer, poet, editor and critic, and whose works on Tagore have been applauded worlds over. It is indeed my privilege and pleasure to welcome Radha Chakravarty to Aaj Savere. Thank you for coming, ma'am.
Thank you, Nidhi. My pleasure to be here with you today.
As we speak, these lines of Rabindranath Tagore come to my mind, where the mind is without fear and the head is held high. Into that heaven of freedom, my father, let my country awake. I think these lines are so beautiful, and I know I'm speaking to a person who's done so much of Tagore and such wonderful work. So how relevant is Tagore today, ma'am?
Well, Tagore, I think, is evergreen. And although he was a man of his time, responding to the society of his time, I think there is so much for us in the 21st century to learn from him. And if we look at his broad concerns, his humanism, his wide social sympathy, his mysticism, his universalism, his concern for social value, for ethical upliftment, and his brilliant creativity which surpasses any age or time. And if we look at the prophetic quality of some of his writings, as if he foresaw what would follow in the decades to come, then we realize that every generation needs to reread Tagore for themselves.
और एक बहुत अहम बात यहाँ पे मैं कहना चाहूंगी कि रविन्द्रनाथ टैगोर ने अपनी नाइटहुड को छोड़ दिया था
बिल्कुल
इन प्रोटेस्ट ऑफ जलियनवाला बाग किलिंग्स. सो ऐसे गिनती के कितने लोग हैं जितने इतना बड़ा त्याग, इतना बड़ा बलिदान किया जैसे उन्होंने किया. एंड एट दैट पर्टिकुलर टाइम नाइटहुड वाज अ वेरी बिग थिंग. So it was. And his works, majorly, Gitanjali, that got him the Nobel Prize in 1913,
yes.
I feel was not his high. He's written much more and much bigger, which we yet have to discover.
That's
so
right.
In your discoveries, ma'am, as a translator, आपको पहले तो हमें बताइए आपने ये लैंड ऑफ कार्ड्स, ताशर देश के बारे में ट्रांसलेशन पूरा किया है. तो आपने क्या क्या महसूस किया और आपको कैसा लगा?
ताशर देश न केवल बच्चों के लिए नाटक है, ये तो इसमें इतना गूढ़ मर्म है, इतने सीरियस कंसर्न्स हैं जो कि स्वाधीनता, ह्यूमन फ्रीडम से जुड़ी हुई हैं. और इसमें हम देखते हैं कि रविंद्रनाथ ने जो उनके समय का जो माहौल था, इंडिया वॉज नॉट फ्री, इट वॉज अंडर फॉरेन रूल, और जो ऑर्थोडॉक्सी का माहौल भी बना हुआ था, बिकॉज पीपल वर ट्राइंग टू प्रिजर्व देयर ट्रेडिशनल कल्चर बिकॉज दे वर एंक्शियस अबाउट द इंटरैक्शंस विथ अदर कल्चर्स विच वुड परहैप्स डाइल्यूट द प्योरिटी of Indian tradition. So he looked at all this and he created this marvelous fantasy of a land of cards where everybody has to follow rules and everybody has to move about in a fixed way.
But it was a paradox कि कहीं ना कहीं वो ये भी कह रहे हैं कि ये रूल मत फॉलो करो.
वही तो मैसेज है प्ले का, because you have to break down these orthodoxies and you have to pursue the spirit of freedom. तो यही संदेश है प्ले का, and that is an evergreen message. I think today more than any other time, when people are thinking in very rigid ways and building boundaries that separate different groups from each other, I think we need to revisit this play.
So that we can break barriers as he was doing.
Absolutely. He was always in favor of, moving, crossing boundaries and seeking out new connections and relationships.
जब आप translation करती हैं, do you stick to the lines?
Well, this is a challenge because sometimes sticking to the line does not bring alive the spirit of the original. I think you have to be true to the spirit of the original and not to the word-by-word format of the original, because there are differences in language, there are differences in culture, and the text in translation has to speak to a reader in another language, and it has to come alive for that reader to mean anything or to communicate anything. So the biggest challenge for the translator is that you don't have complete creative freedom to completely alter the original, and yet you have to bring alive the original in such a way that it will cross cultural and linguistic barriers. So,
which is so important for a country like India.
Indeed, because ours is a multilingual reality and it's a multi-ethnic reality. And unfortunately, so many decades after independence, we still seem to divide ourselves into compartments according to our languages, according to our regions. And I think the translator plays a great role as mediator.
Vividta mein ekta dikhane ke liye.
Bilkul. Bilkul, and I think Tagore was aware of this, and in his lifetime, his writings, especially Gitanjali, all his writings, but especially Gitanjali, they became available in translation not just across India, but across the world. And yet, the process goes on, because I think with every passing decade, new translations are needed that will speak in the new idiom of a new age.
Aapko kya lagta hai? Tagore was a better playwright? Or was he a better poet?
You know, he claimed that he was first and foremost a poet.
Yes.
But he was so much more. उनकी बहुमुखी प्रतिभा वो तो हमें चमत्कृत करती है, क्योंकि वो न केवल कवि थे, वो नाट्यकार थे, कहानीकार थे, उपन्यास लिखते थे, निबंधकार थे, गीतकार संगीतकार भी थे, चित्रकार थे, कितना कुछ वो थे, और साथ साथ वो एक तरह से हम कह सकते हैं दार्शनिक भी थे, और फिर शिक्षा लेके भी जो उनकी सोच है, और
इतनी बड़ी शिक्षा की यूनिवर्सिटी खड़ी
बिल्कुल,
कर दी।
बिल्कुल।
और खुद मेरे ख्याल से स्कूल नहीं जाते थे, पसंद नहीं करते थे शुरू में, तो
he was a school dropout, and he never completed a university degree. His family sent him to the UK.
Flip side of a genius.
No, actually it's not a flip side, because he hated conventional education, because he felt that it stifled the original thinking of the child. Therefore, he was determined to invent an alternative kind of education, and that was the inspiration between Visva-Bharati, this extraordinary experiment in Shantiniketan, where he tried to bring the world together in one nest. That was the motto of Visva-Bharati. And without giving up his rootedness in Indian culture and traditions, he welcomed on board the best that was on offer from every other language and culture of the world. And that was a unique vision, which I think today we need to take
emulate
on board
and follow.
Emulate, absolutely.
Yes, absolutely. So tell us about Chokar Bali. You've translated that as well.
Yes. Chokar Bali fascinated me because it is not just a very complex narrative about human relationships, and I think those of us who have read the book in the original or in translation, or perhaps seen the film and television versions of it which are available now in other languages, we know that it is the story of this beautiful young widow Binodini, and how she comes into the lives of a young newly married, happily married couple and their friend Bihari, and between these four people a tangled web of relationships evolves, and through his depiction of this beautiful widow who is not afraid to express her desires and to claim life, love and success for herself, and the struggles that ensue as a result. I think Tagore invented the modern novel in India, and he was aware that he was doing something new. He said that the novel of the new age does not narrate outward events. It reveals, it unfolds the secrets of the heart. So we are moving away from the dramatic plots and external events of, say, the novels of Bankim Chandra Chatterjee, Tagore's illustrious predecessor, and we see instead the hidden psyche of the protagonists. We see their hidden desires and their emotional tangles, and the psychological novel is born. And this is the marvel of Chokher Bali, which drew me into the act of translation.
Beautiful. मेरा बहुत मन हो रहा है एक टैगोर की रीडिंग सुनने का आपसे.
Okay, I'll read something.
Yes.
Maybe I will read from Tagore's memoirs of his own childhood called Boyhood Days. He says, as time advanced, the sunlight grew harsh. The bell in the portico announced the time. But inside the palki, the day refused to keep track of the passing hours. In there, it was the noon time of those bygone days when the danka, the large kettle drum at the palace gate, would signal the end of the public audience, and the king would depart for his daily bath in sandalwood-scented water. One afternoon, on a holiday, my supervisors had dozed off after their daytime meal. I was alone. The immobile palki sped through the terrain of my mind, borne by loyal minions made of air. The path they traversed had been carved out from my own whims and fancies. On that route the palki travelled, to faraway lands bearing names gleaned from books. Sometimes the journey would take the palki into deep forests, where tiger eyes gleamed and the flesh crept in fear. With me was hunter Bishwanath. Bang went his gun, and it was all over. All was still. Then, at some other point, the palki transformed into a mayurpankhi, a magical boat shaped like a peacock. It floated on the ocean, no sign of land anywhere. In regular rhythm, the oar hit the water. Splash, splash, splash. Up and down, swaying and heaving, the waves rose and fell. Watch out, storm ahoy, cried the sailors. At the helm was oarsman Abdul, with his pointed beard, shaven upper lip, and bald pate.
Lovely.
I knew him. From the river Padma, he fetched tortoise eggs and hilsa fish for Dada, my elder brother.
Beautiful, really.
Thank you.
The way he says the somber to the mundane to the monotonous to the very good. I mean, he's switching from one phase to another, which is really wonderful. And it comes through so alive. If I'd like to ask you now about writers in South Asia, women writers.
Yes.
So, you've done a lot of things in Bangladesh, a lot of writings from Bangladesh.
Yes.
And I think Rabindranath ji to wrote two national anthems, Jana Gana Mana, Amar Sona Bangla.
Amar Sona Bangla.
तो आपने बांग्लादेशी राइटर्स पे जो किया उसके बारे में कुछ हमारे साथ शेयर करिए व्यूअर्स के साथ.
Yes, I had the good fortune of spending a lot of time in Bangladesh, where I got to know the literary circles and some of the foremost contemporary writers there.
Mahashweta Devi?
Mahashweta Devi is, of course, was based in West Bengal, but she was born in what was then East Bengal and is now Bangladesh. So she's claimed by both the Bengals, countries, as it were. Yes. And in fact, over the several times that I've met her, the last time I met her happened to be in Dhaka in 2009. So indeed, yes, like Tagore, Mahashweta is also claimed by both sides of the border. But during my stay in Bangladesh, I realized what a rich and vibrant cultural scene there is, especially in literature, and how little of it is known to us in India, even to West Bengal. And that is what inspired me to work on my book of translations called Crossings, in which I translated 20 contemporary Bengali writers, 10 from Bangladesh and 10 from West Bengal, all living and writing. And it was a learning exercise for me. It was a huge challenge to try and capture the individual voice of each writer, and I had to do a lot of reading and educate myself in order to make my selections for that volume. But in a way, it was for me an important intervention, I felt, because I wanted to place these writers before the non-Bengali world, in order for them to become aware of what's happening around India, because all these cultures have a shared history. Well, I've translated, for instance, Selina Hussain and Syed Shamsul Haq, Hasan Azizul Haq, Rizia Rahman, and several other writers from Bangladesh. And it was, as I said, something that brought to the fore both the connection between what
and
was
you bridged
earlier.
the divide between both the countries
Well, it's
also
the
while doing
same
this.
language, it's the same past, and yet
Yes,
it's a
yes.
divergent present,
Yes.
because history has, taken these two literary traditions in two different directions, and yet there is so much in common. So I wanted that to emerge through my work, not just the work of one or two individual writers, but to place them next to each other.
How do you look at post-colonialism?
Well, I think we do live in a post-colonial world, and we cannot write off the colonial period of our history much as we may want to. The colonial legacy has been for us a mixed one, as we know, and as we learned through our reading of Tagore as well. I mean, you brought up this whole question of Jallianwala Bagh. Well, Tagore was on the one hand a strong and staunch anti-imperialist, but he was also an admirer of English literature and certain things about Western culture which he felt that we ought to adopt in our own world in order to move towards a new kind of modernity. So he had an ambivalence towards the West, towards Western culture. And I think in today's world, we talk of globalization. Today, if you see urban kids everywhere are perhaps wearing similar clothes, listening to the same music, speaking a similar language, and yet somewhere I think there is also this layering of our past, and there is this hybrid culture that has evolved, which is the colonial legacy. Now we can spend our time bemoaning it and kind of being caught in a false nostalgia, or we can see this as a strength that we can draw upon multiple cultures because of our hybrid past and because of the legacy of the connections between East and West that evolved in different directions, of course, during the colonial period. So I think some of the finest writers of our time are doing exactly that. They're treating this in-betweenness, this being in between cultures, as a strength rather than a weakness.
Absolutely, I agree with you on that. और आपका जो साहित्य से रुझाव था, वो when was it that you took the plunge that I will do literature? Take us back to your early life and your journey.
I loved books from ever since I learned how to read, and there is this photograph of my initiation into writing, which in Bengali is a ritual called Hate Khori, where someone sits and you hold a slate and they hold your hand with a chalk.
हमारे में भी होता है, एक अक्षर ओम लिखा जाता है.
Yes, we have a kind of ceremony where we write the alphabet for the first time, and I remember still, I have a hazy memory of that magical experience. I always grew up in a house where people loved books, and the stories told by my great-grandmother and my grandmother and my grandfather, the songs I heard sung, the nursery rhymes, I think they drew me into the world of words.
This is of Kolkata that you're saying?
No, I was born in Kolkata, but I grew up, I've lived outside Kolkata all my life. I grew up in Delhi, but in my home was an atmosphere where I learned to read, write, speak, and function in Bengali before I went to school. I was also learning Hindi before I even learnt English upon joining school. So I think one absorbed books and writing and languages through one's pores when one was young. And I can't say clearly when it evolved into this conviction that I would study literature. I do remember in school we had to choose between science and humanities, and everybody was keen I take science, and I was very firm in saying that I would choose the humanities because I knew as a young girl of 12 that I was going to be a literature person. So I think it has stayed with me ever since. It hasn't gone away.
Lovely. And if you could tell us where you majored from your graduation. And
I've studied in Delhi throughout. So I did my graduation from Delhi University, from Jesus and Mary College, and my master's from Miranda House, also in Delhi University, and subsequently my research has also been from DU, which is also where I have taught for many years. in Miranda House.
You're now with the Ambedkar University.
Yes, I have moved now to Ambedkar University, Delhi, where I am creating a new program along with my other colleagues there. I am imagining into being a new program in comparative literature and translation studies, a field which is very close to my heart.
And which is very required. We need more and more people to translate the multi-ethnicity of India.
Yes,
as I see it.
Yeah,
yes.
I think translation has been given stepmotherly treatment, not only in India, but I think across the world. And now I think there's a resurgence of interest in translation in certain universities in the world. It's picking up in India. I think there's now talk of a translation movement among translators.
Yes,
we're talking about collaborative action. And
जो हमारी सांस्कृतिक धरोहर है वो सामने तो लानी है
लेकिन इसके लिए जरूरी है कि the publishers should cooperate, the market has to change, people's reading tastes have to change, and
the mindset
has to change, and so it
I
needs
should
a
start
collective
enjoying,
will.
for instance, Bangla readings.
Yes, and how will you enjoy that via translation?
Exactly,
right? So,
exactly.
So I think it's a very important medium for mutual understanding between people of different backgrounds, languages and cultures, and that I think the day we learn to recognize that and give it importance will be a very important day for Indian literature. I think that will be a very important day for world literature.
You're married to such an illustrious person. Tell us about Pinak Ranjanji.
He, of course, is somebody with whom I have traveled the world, and it has been another kind of journey alongside the literary journey, being married to a diplomat and encountering other cultures, other spaces, not just via books, but via people. And that too has been, something that has fed into
benchmark in your life.
It's a benchmark, but it's also it's a great honor to represent your country, at the same time a great challenge, because you're confronted with otherness all the time. But I think it has been another parallel education, and these two twin experiences have fed into each other. I think the things that I read have fed into my interactions with the many people one has met as an ambassador's spouse, and I think at the same time all those experiences from
was he the ambassador in
world,
Dhaka?
He was High Commissioner in Bangladesh and later on ambassador to Thailand as well. Yes.
And you have a son, right?
Yes.
Who's also doing very well, St. Stephen's, and now economics.
Oh, well, yes, he is Abhishek. He is now Assistant Professor of Economics at Essex University, probably will soon be moving to Manchester, but very strongly connected with everything that's happening in India, and visits often and remains very, very close to everything happening at home. So, so he is a person who has one foot in both worlds, I would say.
And if I ask you, what are your translation agenda now? I mean, which is the book that you're working on presently?
Well, I've just completed a project recently, which is a Tagore project, which went beyond my big book called The Essential Tagore, which looked at Tagore's writings in translation across 10 genres. But Shades of Difference, my recently published book, also includes audiovisual material, because as I said earlier in this interview, Tagore was so versatile, and he was not just a writer, he was a painter, and he was a composer and a creator of songs and plays, and all these facets I felt should be included in our understanding of him. So the DVD that accompanies my new book has audiovisual material, it has video clips, some of the material is archival, but some of it is very, very contemporary adaptations of Tagore, translations of Tagore, performed or written in different languages, different Indian languages, different foreign languages, because Tagore does not just belong to Bengal or only to India. He belongs to the world. He belongs to the world, and one wanted to bring something of that into one's project. So that is what I have been working with. And alongside, I have been writing and presenting my own poems, some of which are being published now. So that is another area of my activity.
And on that wonderful note, this is a wrap on this edition of Aaj Savere. Thank you so much for coming and sharing your views with us. And we hope that you continue celebrating Tagore. Namaskar.
Thank you.